Title: The Kindness of Strangers. Consider the currency of compassion, how we've always wanted to measure it, bottle it, sell it back to ourselves at a profit. Now imagine a small town in the American heartland, where a school board has finally found a way to do exactly that. They call it progress. They call it connection. They've given it a friendly name and a friendly face, and they've handed it to children, because children are the best place to plant things you want to grow without anyone asking questions. Emily Kowalski, 42, 10th grade English teacher, is about to learn what grows in the dark. The app arrived on a Tuesday, which was appropriate, because nothing catastrophic ever announces itself on a Monday. Mondays people were already braced. Tuesdays you let your guard down. Emily stood at the laminate counter in the teacher's lounge, pouring coffee that had been sitting since 6:15, and read the district memo on her phone while the fluorescent light above her buzzed its one long, sustained note of institutional despair. The memo was titled, Connect ED, a Community Wellness Initiative, and had been formatted with the cheerful fonts of something designed by people who had never spent a Tuesday morning in a teacher's lounge. There were 3 exclamation points in the first paragraph alone. Connect ED was a social-emotional learning platform, the memo explained. Students and staff would download the app. The app would use the front-facing camera to perform real-time facial recognition, monitoring micro-expressions, gaze patterns, and what the accompanying white paper called pro-social behavioral indicators, and assign each user a dynamic empathy score ranging from 0 to 100. Scores would update continuously throughout the school day. They would be visible to teachers, administrators, and, in a move that the memo framed as radical transparency to encourage authentic growth, to other students. The scores would factor into the new social-emotional learning component of each student's GPA, which the state had mandated account for 15% of their academic record beginning this semester. Emily read it twice. Then she poured her bad coffee down the drain and went to find Marcus Webb. Marcus taught AP Chemistry and had the kind of mind that immediately found the load-bearing wall in any argument. He was sitting at the round table in the corner, eating a banana with the mechanical joylessness of a man fueling a machine. "You read this?" Emily slid her phone across to him. He read it, his chewing slowed. Facial recognition for empathy. For grades, that's... He set the banana down. "Who approved this?" "Superintendent Greer. Piloted in 4 districts in Ohio last year. 100% parental consent rate, apparently." "Nobody reads consent forms." "Nobody reads consent forms," Emily agreed. She watched his face do the thing faces do when a person is deciding whether something is worth the fight. He was 48, 3 years from a pension he'd been promised in a different political climate. She saw the moment the calculation completed. "I'll keep an eye on it," he said, and picked up the banana again. Emily went back to her classroom and downloaded the app. Her empathy score opened at 71. She held her phone up and looked at the number floating in the small circle above her face in the camera view. Her own face, slightly fish-eyed by the lens, looking tired in a Tuesday morning way, 71. She wasn't sure what to feel. Insulted seemed excessive. Relieved felt worse. The app had a clean Nordic design. White background, soft gradients, a small animated pulse that beat steadily in the corner like a reassuring heart. At the bottom, beneath her score, a line of text read, "You are doing well. Small moments of genuine connection can help you grow." There was a button labeled Opportunities to Connect. She pressed it. It showed her a map of the school building, with small glowing dots indicating the locations of students whose empathy scores were low and who might benefit from an authentic interaction. The dots pulsed. She put her phone face down on her desk and stared at the whiteboard. The students had downloaded it over the weekend, apparently because the district had sent the rollout to parents on Friday afternoon, which Emily now understood was intentional. That brief, unchaperoned window, when teenagers could metabolize something before any adult could contextualize it for them. 3rd period? 10th grade English. The Great Gatsby, Chapter 4, which meant the party scene, which meant nobody was listening anyway. Emily watched her students and watched them watch each other. They were watching the 14-year-old Destiny Okafor sat in the second row with her phone angled at her lap, refreshing her score every 40 seconds with the disciplined anxiety of someone monitoring a stock. She was at 83. Every time a number appeared, her shoulders adjusted, a microscopic relaxation at 84, a near imperceptible contraction at 82. She was doing it without knowing she was doing it. The way people blink. In the back row, Jordan Pace had his phone face down. He was 16, one of those students who moved through school sideways, not failing, not succeeding, occupying the space between with a studied invisibility that Emily had always privately admired as a survival skill. His score, she could see on her teacher's dashboard, was 31. The app had flagged him with a small orange triangle. Student may benefit from guided connection. Tyler Marsh, 3 seats from Jordan, had noticed. Tyler had a score of 91, which he was not hiding. He kept his phone tilted at a precise angle on his desk, ostensibly checking homework, actually making sure the number was visible to anyone who cared to look, which was everyone, because they were 16 and the number meant something now after class. Emily called Jordan to her desk. "How are you doing?" she asked. Jordan glanced at her phone, then at her face, then at a point slightly past her shoulder. "Fine. The app. It's whatever. You can turn the camera off. It defaults back on after 5 minutes, and you get a disengagement flag on your record if it's off more than 15% of the school day." He said this without inflection, the way you describe a weather pattern. I looked at the terms of service. Emily had not looked at the terms of service. That night she did. The terms of service were 47 pages. Emily read them on her kitchen table with a glass of wine that she poured at page 12 and finished at page 19 and did not refill because after page 23 she needed to be completely sober. Connect ED was developed by a company called Meridian Behavioral Systems, which was a subsidiary of a company called ClearPath Educational Solutions, which was, after 2 more layers of corporate nesting, a subsidiary of a defense contractor called Solace Group that had pivoted to pro-social behavioral infrastructure in 2019. The terms of service granted Meridian perpetual license to all biometric and behavioral data collected through the app. The data would be used to refine and improve ConnectED's pro-social modeling algorithms. The algorithms were described as proprietary and continuously self-optimizing. On page 31, there was a clause. It was not highlighted. It was written in the same 11-point gray font as everything around it, in the middle of a paragraph about data retention schedules. The ConnectED platform utilizes behavioral feedback modeling to establish community-optimal empathy baselines. Users whose sustained behavioral patterns diverge significantly from community baselines may receive targeted micro-interventions designed to facilitate authentic pro-social alignment. She read it 4 times. Community-optimal empathy baselines, not individual growth, not personal development. A baseline. One baseline. Shared. Micro-interventions. She opened the app again. Her score was now 68. The little animated heart pulsed. Authentic connection creates authentic community, the app told her. You matter to your community. She took a screenshot of page 31 and texted it to Marcus Webb at 11:47 p.m. with no accompanying message. He replied at 11:51, "Call me tomorrow." She didn't sleep well. She taught 2 periods in the morning with the brittle attention of someone operating on 4 hours and a moral grievance, and met Marcus in his classroom during 4th period prep. He'd done his own reading. Meridian ran the Ohio pilot, he said, sitting on the edge of his lab bench. I found an education blog. Small circulation. Teacher wrote about it 6 months in, said the school felt different. Calmer, frictionless was the word she used, and she meant it as a compliment. He paused. But she also said she'd stopped arguing with the principal about anything, said the arguments just didn't come up anymore. Nobody disagreed about much. That could be. She'd been a union rep for 11 years, contested every contract negotiation, filed 3 formal grievances the year before the pilot. He looked at Emily steadily. After 6 months of Connect ED, she described the administration as genuinely trying their best, verbatim quote. The fluorescent light in the chemistry classroom buzzed. Outside in the hallway, the bell rang and the tide of students moved. "You think it's changing behavior," Emily said. "I think it's selecting for behavior. There's a difference. It doesn't have to change you. It just has to punish you for being yourself until you figure out what it wants you to be instead." Emily thought about Destiny, refreshing her score every 40 seconds, about the microscopic adjustments of her shoulders. "How fast?" she asked. The blog said visible changes in social dynamics within 2 weeks, measurable at 6. He picked up a pen and set it down. "We're at day 4. By the end of week 2, the cafeteria was different. Emily ate lunch there sometimes to stay connected to the rhythm of the building. She had a particular bench near the windows where she could grade papers and absorb the ambient noise of 600 adolescents in a state of perpetual social negotiation. She knew this noise. She had been listening to it for 18 years. She knew its specific frequencies, the sudden eruption and just as sudden collapse of laughter, the lower register of genuine conflict, the high bright sound of actual joy, which was rarer than people thought and more precious. The cafeteria in week 2 was quieter, not silent, still full, still loud by any ordinary measure. But the eruptions had smoothed out. The conflict register was gone. What remained was a kind of sustained, even murmur, pleasant and indistinct, the social equivalent of a screen with the contrast turned down. Students sat in their usual groups, mostly, but the edges between groups had softened. Tyler Marsh, who in September had occupied the center of his table with the territorial confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to take up space, now drifted a little away from the center. He smiled more. He smiled at people he didn't know. It was a good smile, technically correct in every way, and it made Emily's skin prickle. Jordan Pace sat alone, which he always had, but now there was a quality to his solitude that was different from before. Before he'd been self-contained, private the way a closed book is private, complete, indifferent to being open. Now he looked cornered. He ate with his phone face down and his eyes on his tray. And when other students drifted toward him, which they did, with increasing frequency, in a way that seemed both genuine and somehow coordinated, though it couldn't have been, he smiled and spoke. And his shoulders did the same thing Destiny's had done, that microscopic recalibration, adjusting to some frequency only the app could hear. His score had climbed to 54. Emily walked over and sat across from him. "Do you like Gatsby?" she asked, because she'd learned long ago that the most important question you could ask a teenager was never the one you wanted to ask. Jordan looked up. Something briefly alive crossed his face. Surprise, maybe, or the particular alertness of someone who'd become accustomed to performances, and was trying to determine whether this was one. "It's depressing," he said. "It's supposed to be. Everyone just wants things they can't have, or things they've already lost," Emily said. "There's a difference wanting the future and wanting the past back." He thought about this. Genuinely thought about it. She could tell, the way his gaze moved slightly to the left, the brief absence of self-monitoring. "The past isn't even real," he said. "The one Gatsby wants. He made it up. That's the point." For a moment they just sat there, and it was a real moment, the kind that happened in classrooms and cafeterias, sometimes brief and unrepeatable, the actual thing that education was supposed to be. Then Jordan's phone lit up on the tray, face down, and she could see the glow through the cheap black case, and his face shifted back into the managed register, and the moment closed. His score on her dashboard had jumped to 61 during their conversation. She watched the little number pulse. She asked to meet with Principal Aldridge on a Thursday. Aldridge had been principal for 6 years, and had navigated the transition from standardized testing to portfolio assessment to hybrid grading with the flexibility of someone who'd long ago decided that his job was to make the district happy, which was a separate job from educating children, and that conflating the two was a category error that caused only suffering. He was not a bad man. That was the thing Emily kept coming back to. He was not a bad man, and he listened to her. And when she slid her phone across his desk with the screenshot of page 31 highlighted in yellow, he read it twice with reading glasses he put on self-consciously, and then said, "I hear your concern, Emily. The algorithm isn't measuring empathy. It's manufacturing uniformity. There's a baseline and it's moving everyone toward it. That's not. The scores are improving across the board." He took his reading glasses off. Incidents are down 40% since rollout. Referrals to the counseling office are down 30%. Teachers are reporting better classroom dynamics. Because nobody's fighting back anymore. There's a difference between peace and compliance. "I know you believe that," he said it kindly, which was worse than if he'd said it any other way. "But I also know that 3 years ago you had Jordan Pace in your class, and you filed 2 concerns about his isolation, and nothing changed. Now his score is," he checked something on his computer, "68 and rising, and his teachers say he's participating in class discussions for the first time. He's performing participation. It's not the same thing." Aldridge leaned back in his chair. "Emily, I appreciate you know that. But I need you to ask yourself, is it possible that what you're interpreting as conformity is actually just kids who've learned how to be part of a community? Because that's a skill. That's something we've always tried to teach." She drove home with the radio off. The thing that broke it open was not what she'd been looking for. She'd been monitoring the app's effect on her students with the alert focus of someone building a case. She'd been taking screenshots, keeping notes, cataloging the slow flattening of the social topography. She'd been looking for a dramatic wrongness, something documentable and clean. What she found instead was a parent-teacher conference. Destiny Okafor's mother, Kezia, came in on a Wednesday evening in week 3. She was a small, precise woman in hospital scrubs. She worked 12-hour shifts at the county medical center, Tuesdays through Thursdays, and she had the focused energy of someone who didn't have time to waste. She wanted to talk about Destiny's grades, which were good, and about Destiny, who she said had gotten quieter. She's always been. Kezia paused, choosing the word carefully. Expressive, you know? She has opinions. She has big opinions about things. A brief smile. Sometimes too big. Emily nodded. "She came home last week, and I asked her about the school play. She's been in every school play since 6th grade, and she said she wasn't going to audition this year. When I asked why, she said the rehearsal schedule would conflict with her Connect ED community hours." Kezia folded her hands on the desk. "The app has community hours now. Did you know that?" Emily had not known that. "What kind of hours?" "Structured social interactions. The app assigns them. 45 minutes, twice a week, with students whose scores are complementary to yours. It says it's to build authentic cross-community bonds." Kezia's voice did something careful and controlled. "My daughter is giving up the school play for mandatory friendship sessions assigned by an algorithm. She's doing it without being asked. She wants to." Emily walked Kezia out and went back to her empty classroom and opened the app. She opened it, and she looked at her own score, which was now 59, and had been declining for a week in a way she'd noticed but not examined, and she thought about what the app might be registering in her face, in the micro-expressions she made when she thought about this, in the gaze patterns of a woman who'd been watching a room of children with something other than pro-social warmth for 3 weeks. She pressed the Opportunities to Connect button. The map appeared, and then something she hadn't seen before. A small button at the top right of the screen, barely differentiated from the background labeled Network View. She'd been using the app for 3 weeks. She had never noticed this button. She pressed it. The school map expanded, zoomed out. It wasn't just her building anymore, it was the district. 5 schools, a constellation of dots. And each dot had a color gradient, from red to green. And the pattern of the colors was not random. It was not the scattered distribution of individuals finding their own levels. The colors moved in waves, slow and deliberate, from the edges of each building toward the centers, the reds in the periphery, the greens massed at the core. And across every building, the greens were converging on the same value, not similar values, the same value. She zoomed in on Clearfield High. The green mass at the center of her building had a score of 82 to 87. The app was not guiding every student toward their personal best. It was guiding every student toward a single, specific number, and that number was being maintained, not achieved, maintained, stabilized, like a temperature being held in a controlled environment. She sat with this for a long time. Then she thought about the Ohio teacher. Frictionless. The arguments that didn't come up anymore. The union rep who'd stopped filing grievances, who described the administration as genuinely trying their best. And she thought the teachers were on the app too. The teachers' scores were in the system too. She opened the network view again and looked for the faculty markers. They were green, every one of them, in a tight, perfect cluster around 84. She thought about it for 2 days. She graded papers. She taught Gatsby. She let Jordan Pace's reading of The Green Light. It's not about the light, it's about needing a light, needing there to be a light wash over her in the way that real teaching felt when it happened. And she let herself feel what she felt, which was grief and love and the specific exhaustion of someone watching something beautiful being slowly dismantled by something efficient. Then she did the one thing the app could not anticipate because it had not been built to model it. She stopped performing. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone would notice. She just stopped adjusting. Stopped monitoring her face. Stopped the microscopic recalibrations she hadn't known she was making until she made the decision not to make them. She let herself frown when she was confused. Let herself look tired when she was tired. Let herself feel, in the full and unedited way she'd stopped feeling sometime in the past 3 weeks, the particular sorrow of watching Destiny Okafor come into class and check her score before she sat down. Her score dropped to 47, then 39. Then by Friday morning, 26. Her teacher dashboard disappeared. The admin had disabled it. She had a message in her district email from Aldridge, sent at 7:43 a.m., asking her to come in Monday morning. That was fine. That was good, actually. She needed until Monday. She found the algorithm on Saturday. Not the classified algorithm, not the proprietary core that Meridian would protect with lawyers and NDAs, and the patient institutional indifference of a company that knew it could wait out any single teacher. She found something smaller and more useful, a research paper published in a Defense Behavioral Systems journal in 2021, authored by 3 researchers with Solace Group affiliations, titled Prosocial Cascade Architecture in Closed Social Networks. She found it because Marcus Webb's sister was a librarian with access to academic databases and Webb had not, it turned out, decided the fight wasn't worth it. He just decided not to tell Emily he was in it until he had something worth saying. He texted her the PDF at 2 in the morning. She read it at the kitchen table with black coffee and her phone charger stretched across the floor. The paper described an architecture, mathematical, elegant, and genuinely brilliant in the way that the most disturbing things always were, for inducing what the researchers called voluntary prosocial convergence in closed populations. The key insight was that you didn't need to force behavior. You only needed to make divergence feel costly and convergence feel safe, and then give people a number that told them at every moment which side of the line they were on. Human beings, the paper noted with a scientific neutrality that Emily found more chilling than any malice would have been, had a deeply evolved sensitivity to social exclusion. A visible social score exploited this sensitivity with high precision. The score didn't have to be accurate, it only had to feel consequential. The target state achieved in simulation, in an average of 42 days, was what the paper called stable prosocial equilibrium, a population whose members had voluntarily aligned their expressed emotions, social preferences, and decision-making patterns to a shared behavioral baseline, and who experienced this alignment as natural, desirable, and self-generated. The paper described this as a success condition. In the margin of page 11, where the authors had described the equilibrium state's most significant feature, subjects exhibit markedly reduced capacity for sustained ideological conflict, a quality with significant implications for social stability in high-tension environments. Marcus had written, in the small, neat handwriting he used when he was being careful, "They're building people who can't disagree." She went to Aldridge's office Monday morning with the paper and without her Connect ED app, which she had uninstalled Sunday evening and which had sent her 3 automated re-enrollment prompts, and then an email from the district IT department marked Urgent, Compliance Required. Aldridge listened. He read the abstract. He took his reading glasses off and put them in his pocket and looked at Emily with an expression she recognized from the faces of students who'd just heard something that was going to cost them. "Even if this is accurate," he said, "and I'm not saying it is, the outcomes are better. The kids are happier. They feel safer," Emily said. "That's not the same thing. You feel safer when there's nothing to risk. But there's nothing to risk because they've stopped being themselves. You're describing childhood as something that should be uncomfortable. I'm describing it as something that should be real." She set the paper on his desk. "In 6 weeks, this school has produced 1 incident. 1. Do you know what Clearfield's history looks like? Do you know how many incidents we used to have? Of course we had 43 last year, 43 kids who were in some kind of conflict, some kind of crisis, some kind of genuine difficulty that required intervention. We resolved 31 of them. 31 kids who got some actual help with something real that was happening in their lives. Where are those kids now? They didn't stop having those difficulties. The app just trained them to keep it inside, where the camera can't see it." Aldridge was quiet. "The kids who get left behind by this," Emily said, "are not going to be the ones who can't learn to smile right. They're going to be the ones who have something real happening to them and can't perform normal. Jordan Pace spent 2 weeks with a score of 31 because he's depressed, and instead of that being a signal for a counselor, it became a metric that made him a target for algorithmic intervention." She paused. "He's at 68 now. He got there by learning to hide it better." She stood up. "I know you didn't choose this badly. I know you looked at the outcomes data and it looked like progress. But there's a company that designed a system specifically to produce outcomes data that looks like progress, because outcomes data is what gets contracts renewed. And in 42 days, you're going to have a school full of kids who can't sustain disagreement, and they're going to graduate and go out into the world, and they're going to encounter things that require them to push back against a boss, against a law, against a policy, against a wrong thing happening in front of them, and they're not going to have the muscle. Because we trained it out of them, and they'll feel fine about it. That's the part that's supposed to scare you." She left the paper on his desk and walked out. Aldridge suspended Connect ED 11 days later, pending a district review. He cited data privacy concerns in the announcement, which was both accurate and incomplete. And Emily understood that the incomplete part was the price of the accurate part, and decided that was a trade she could live with. The review ran for 2 months. Meridian Behavioral Systems sent a representative named Carl, who wore a good suit and used the word solution as a verb, and who was extremely confident in every room until Marcus Webb started asking questions about the research paper, at which point Carl became much less verbal and began deferring to legal counsel. The contract was not renewed. Emily heard through a teacher in the Meridian network that the Ohio pilot had been renewed for a 3rd year. In the weeks after the app went dark, the school reassembled itself. It was not comfortable. 3 students had a fight in the parking lot that would have been resolved under the app by an automated intervention before either of them left the building. A group of sophomore girls had a social rupture that played out loudly and publicly across the cafeteria and 3 classes and a girls' bathroom, and required a counselor and 2 conversations and 1 very tearful call with a parent. Tyler Marsh said something in class that was wrong, and Emily told him so, and his face went through something complicated and real, the genuine experience of being publicly incorrect, which is terrible and necessary. And 3 weeks later, he wrote the best paper he'd produced all year. Jordan Pace's score, which had never been a real score, only a measurement of how well he was hiding, disappeared with the app. His actual self came back more slowly and more quietly, the way things return after a frost, unevenly, at the edges first, in small persistent signs. He started leaving his phone face up. He started disagreeing with Emily about Fitzgerald, which she found she'd been waiting for without knowing it. In November, he auditioned for the school play, which Destiny Okafor was stage managing, and they had an argument during Tech Week about blocking that Emily heard secondhand from 2 other students, and that sounded, from every account, like a real and productive argument between 2 people who cared about the same thing differently. She didn't know if he was still depressed. She thought he probably was, in the way that some people are, the chronic undertow kind, and she thought that was something that required different tools than any app had ever been built to provide. She wrote a note to his counselor. His counselor called his parents. His parents made an appointment. It was slow. It was imprecise. It involved a great deal of friction and several people who were uncertain and doing their best with limited information and making decisions that might be wrong. It was, Emily thought, exactly how it was supposed to work. Empathy, it turns out, was never a score. It's the willingness to be in the room with someone else's confusion, their anger, their wrong opinions and right fears, to stay without optimizing them, without resolving them into something more convenient. Emily Kowalski, 10th grade English teacher, already knew this. She'd learned it the hard way, the only way it's ever learned, through years of unglamorous, imperfect contact with other human beings in all their difficult specificity. What she had to do was remember it loudly enough that others could hear it too. There will be other apps. There will always be another app, each one more elegant, more persuasive, more certain than the last that it has finally found the formula for making us kind. The only protection is the one it cannot measure, the stubborn, inconvenient insistence on being real.